Uh, Alrighty. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the ad hoc committee, Zero Emission Vehicle Committee to order. It is 11:07 a.m. on August 31st. I'd like to note for the record that Director Williams and Geisinger, members of the committee, are here. And we are also joined by Directors Broom and Rivera Malpietti. Thank you all for joining us. So I know Director Bouquet mentioned that he was going to be a couple minutes late. And want to make sure that he can actively sort of participate in what we are doing. And I think we've had a few conversations with staff as well about scheduling and cadence and making sure that they can be there. As a brief reminder, we as a committee here are the goals that we as a committee have stated we are working towards, which is recommending to the RTD Board of Directors a policy or set of policies to transition RTD to a zero emission fleet and reduce its Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 greenhouse gas emissions as an entire agency using the greenhouse gas protocol. It should be as measured by the greenhouse gas protocol. As defined by the greenhouse gas protocol, Scope 1 GHG emissions are those emissions that are directly released or created by the agency. So those are going to be things like the emissions from our buses, the emissions from gas boilers, the emissions, it's an all-encompassing definition of emissions that we directly create. Scope 2 emissions are those emissions that occur as a consequence of supplied electricity, heat, steam, and or cooling. So for a majority, if not all of RTD's territory and facilities, that's going to be our electricity that we purchase from Excel Energy. And unless the management, in order to manage towards these goals, decides to proceed with solar or another power arrangement, which would be buying carbon-free electricity, we will largely be sort of beholden to what Excel is doing. There are other ways to reduce Scope 2 emissions through efficiency improvements and building operations improvements, but generally speaking, unless you enter into a power purchase agreement or other arrangement where you own solar or another clean source of fuel, you're beholden to your utility or electric cooperative. And Scope 3 emissions are those emissions that occur as a result of activities taking place at the agency. So these are what exist within our supply chain. The draft policy will address the date by which RTD will fully transition to a zero GHG emission fleet, with a requirement for the GM and CEO to establish interim goals for GHG reduction, which shall be no later than 2050, the last date of RTD's procurement for GHG emitting vehicles, and how often the policy should be revisited and updated. And I would like to note for the record that we have been joined by Director Bouquet. Thank you for being here. So to quickly revisit our schedule or our proposed schedule, here's where we are. Today is August 31st, planning for roundtables, agreeing upon questions, design, and purpose for the roundtables. But I do want to note and flag for folks that I think there was a discussion last week about the importance of having, staff and folks from our team there to listen in on these roundtables and participate in them. And we've been told that staff, the staff for whom it would be relevant to participate, have a conflict during this time. So in order to accommodate that, I would like to recommend that we work with Deborah, GM CEO Johnson, and her office to identify times and dates when those staff might be available. And we'll need to communicate that out to those who have already been sort of put on alert that we'd like them to join us. And thank you to Director Williams for doing that quick outreach on that. So any thoughts there? Has anyone's feelings changed since we last discussed wanting our staff to be there? Great. I will also not be available on September 14th, so you all will be in the trusted hands of Director Geisinger. I am also, she and I discussed possibly also just skipping the 14th if that works for folks. I don't really have a preference or care, but want to know what you all, given that we won't be having the roundtable on the 14th, what you all would like to do on that date so we can adjust the schedule accordingly. Yeah, Director Williams.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so unfortunately, I think that I invited a whole bunch of people to come talk to us then. Has anybody let them know that that's not a fact?
So I followed up. Go ahead, Director Geisinger.
No, go ahead.
I say, so I followed up with those folks, and you saw I was on those emails, and that's the part of the challenge of reaching out before we know everything's fully baked, and doing that early outreach. So I am happy to take the charge of following up with those folks. Once we letting them know, hey, it's probably not going to be the 14th at 11. My thought was to wait until we had the new time to let them know, to say, hey, it's not going to be the 14th at 11, but it is going to be this date at this time.
So I would recommend that we do that now, because these are people who have full-time jobs that have made an effort to block out their calendar, and that is 2 weeks from now. And so I think that right now in this meeting, we should decide when we do want them to come. Otherwise, we risk being unprofessional and not very nice.
I totally hear that, and I know it's a timing issue, and I think folks are generally flexible and understanding. But yes, I will send those emails out as soon as we finish. Unfortunately, I can't tell them exactly when it's going to be, because we need to hear back from our staff on when they are going to be available.
So let me get this straight. So we are absolutely stymied here because we haven't heard from our staff. And since we haven't heard from our staff, we cannot hear from people who are outside of the agency, just on information until we hear from our staff. Is that right?
Generally speaking, as someone who also works full time, I prefer to get fewer emails than more, and with solidified plans. So I know you were quick to email everyone out before we sort of fully solidified and heard back. So it was, things move and change as time goes on. So we want to make sure.
That's not the question. The question I ask is, are you saying that we cannot today schedule a time for these 3 or 4 people who are in the industry until we hear something from our staff? That's what I'm at. It's a question. Is that what you are saying?
Correct, because I don't know when they're available, but it sounds like it's sort of being a bit pejorative towards our staff. These are things that are moving quickly, and there's communication that happens, and everyone's got a lot going on. So I hear that you're concerned about possible reputation in the community, and I want to just acknowledge that, but also acknowledge that things move and change quickly, and that from sitting in those meetings and being on those committees, as you are too, things change. So if you would like to reach out to those folks, if it's important to you to reach out to them and say, hey, it's not going to be the 14th.
I will say, and we don't know when it will be. We can't give you any other date because our staff has not responded to us. I wasn't clear originally that it was a mandatory that for these people to just talk informatively, that we had to have, what is it that we're needing from our staff in order to have some people in the industry give us information? Now let me repeat the question clearly. What is it that we need from our staff in order to listen to some industry experts?
Director Geisinger, do you want to go?
Sure. Director Deschelle also has a conflict on the 14th, and I think we should respect that and have him be at our roundtable. So we have 2 issues there. I think, we should be able to get an answer from staff pretty quickly. I don't think we put the question to him other than, hearing that this time was a conflict. So I would suggest that, after this, let's see what time they have. Maybe we can suggest another date that does work for us, or some other dates, and either way, we can get them from the staff and then move forward. But the 14th isn't, in my opinion, going to work anyhow, because I don't want to run the meeting without Director Deschelle here if we're bringing in outside people. So that's my thought.
I'm good on that. That still doesn't answer the question. I'll say it again.
Director Williams, I heard the question. I think as we think about a strategic priority, employee ownership is critical. And last time we had all discussed that it was important that our staff were there. And now today, during our meeting, you're getting upset that we want
I'm not
staff to
upset.
be there.
I'm not upset. I'm still trying to get an answer to a very simple question. And I understand that you're not available on the 14th. With that, I don't have a problem telling the people that I ask that we are not able to listen to them on the 14th. I'm fine with that. I can tell them that we don't have a date yet. I'm fine with that. I just need myself personally to understand what it is that we need from RTD staff in order to be able to listen to some outside sources.
Need, probably we don't need anything. There is a strong desire, which was expressed last time, to have staff be there and participate in those roundtables.
Okay, so in other words, we need to get the availability of some members of the RTD staff in order to pick a date to have outside sources speak to us.
Correct. So this is something that
Okay, I got that.
Okay.
I suggest we try to do that pretty quickly, like today, so we're not getting back to people twice.
And that was why I would, if we can, hold off until maybe Thursday to communicate that out to folks, so that hopefully we can just spend one communication.
Okay. And which of our staff, could you give me some names? Because I'm kind of, I don't know, somehow got left out on this piece of what's going on. Or I forgot or something. Who exactly is it on the RTD staff that we are waiting to hear from about their available dates to be present at a roundtable?
So I do not micromanage our staff. I will send an email to Deborah Johnson, who will be responsible for implementing the policy, to see who would be available at that time. I know specifically Fred Worthen was not available and is someone who was mentioned who should be there. But I will email her because she's the one who's going to be responsible for implementing this policy. I do not.
What policy? What policy? Oh, I'm so confused.
Sure. So let's take a couple steps back.
Okay, I'm just asking now for who on the RTD staff, we or Deborah or Fred Worthen or somebody is going to attend whatever date we pick to have outside people talk to us. I'm sorry, you guys, if I'm just really being obtuse, I'm just confused.
Sure. So we put together, in order to answer your question, I want to make sure you have a full picture of what we're doing.
Okay.
So I walked through our purpose, right, which is to propose a policy to the RTD board of directors. Last time we all met, we discussed wanting to make sure that staff were available to participate in the roundtables so that they could be present for the conversation about learning from other agencies, as well as hearing about those emerging technologies and aligning with regional goals. We then heard that there were schedule conflicts with this meeting time. As I do not micromanage people, I did not ask who, where's their email, when did they say they were available, when did they say they weren't. That's not my style of working. And so I do not have an answer back on the individuals that either our GM CEO, who may have delegated to Fred Worthen, or who they would like to have president. I do not know who those individuals are. But after this meeting, I will be emailing to follow up to say, we want to make sure that we can get these scheduled. Please provide availability in the month of September.
Okay. Got it. That's fine.
Great. Director Bouquet, I saw you had your hand up.
It was to the previous conversation. Thank you, though.
So as we think about our roundtables, I think it's important to have agreement on what is the purpose. Why are we doing this? No one has any thoughts on why we're hosting these roundtables? Yeah, Director Bouquet.
I'll start us off. So the whole purpose and the intent when we originally discussed these roundtables, I think it's always a fair comparison when it comes down to comparing ourselves to other industries, and other agencies that are coming down to our field to see what their goals are. Again, it should be competitive, specific, well, not competitive, but to be aligned potentially where other agencies are when it comes down to these roundtables. That was my whole understanding of the roundtables, to understand what are the agency's goals so that we can understand what our goals are ultimately at RTD. Again, looking at other transit or transportation agencies to come down to what are their goals when it comes down to creating a zero emission fleet. And as we discussed, and it looked like at the very beginning of this meeting, breaking down what our different tiers are. That was my understanding of it. I think, again, you need to compare apples to apples when it comes down to these industries. I know sometimes these industries between RTD might look like apples and oranges, but I think it is a fair comparison to hear where other local agencies are when it comes down to the zero emission goals. Yeah, and that was my hope from it.
Any other thoughts on the goal or purpose of these different roundtables? Why we are convening them?
Let's see.
Director Deschelle,
Yes.
pardon me not putting on my camera, but
No
my
worries.
internet's a little weird. I think, thank you for letting me join in and put in my 2 cents, but it seems to me that the whole zero emission discussion is a fairly new component that we're looking at, not just in the region, but in the state and in the country, right? So that's the first thing. I would be really interested in utilizing this time on lessons learned from other agencies of what they've seen working and what they see not working. And what kinds of legislation is being put in place to help really move forward the whole zero emission capacity, and what does that look like for public transit agencies in our region and across the country?
Director Rivera-Malpiedi, I tried to capture what I heard from your, is that accurate?
Looks pretty good. Yeah, it does look accurate.
Great. Thank you, Director.
Just a quick question. Is it established, given that the savings on changing the fuel source will pay for the additional capital costs for the more expensive buses and for the infrastructure that has to be put in to recharge?
Yeah, so there's, it's a great question and it's an interesting one, and it depends on how you measure cost. So both at the city and county of Denver, I believe, and certainly at the state level, they've introduced what they're called the social cost of carbon, which I don't recall that amount. So it depends on, are you looking at actual dollars in versus dollars out, or are you including that social cost of carbon, which has been established?
Well, I'm just looking at our, total budget situation. In other words, are we gonna, if we're gonna make this switch, does it mean that we're gonna have to cut routes and so forth to cover the incremental cost of making the switch? Or does it mean that there's enough savings in there that we can, by changing out over time, pay for the infrastructure and for those more expensive fleet additions, so that we don't have to reduce service in order to introduce this new technology?
Yeah, I think this isn't a question that I think comes up on any other capital improvement, frankly. But I think it's a valid question to ask, and it's something that we can probably look at putting in the policy to say, this shouldn't be done to cut service in any way. But I would also say that balance is a management decision, not a policy decision. Right? You have to manage towards a goal.
Well, you've got multiple goals here. I mean, one of our goals is to provide as much service as we can. But if we're going to spend money and have to cut routes in order to do it, then we're at cross purposes with another goal.
So I don't think providing as much service as we can is one of the strategic priorities of the agency.
Yeah, but I mean, that's one of the problems we have as far as, do you have, 15-minute service or do you have 30-minute service? That all fits in. Obviously, you don't provide service where there's no demand for service or very little demand for service. But I'm going to butt out now because I just tuned in to listen, and so I'm taking up too much airtime. Thank you.
No worries. Thanks, Director Brim. Director Geisinger.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's a very good question, and I have two thoughts. I do think that not cutting service, providing services is important towards our community value and customer excellence strategic goals. And I think that one of the things we want to learn in this process is what money is out there, because I think there's more money out there than ever has been before for this. It's state level, federal level, and so what kind of grant funding helps us. Yeah, if you put the costs side by side, they're a lot bigger issues than if you can go out and get some of these enterprises or the federal government to help. So thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, Director McKay.
I'm gonna get a second bite of the apple if you're okay. Just to kind of pinpoint again with the scope, when one of the big leading maybe this goes into the guiding questions, but going back to goals, because sometimes goals can be pretty broad. One of the biggest things I specifically think about is other transit agencies and then our partners. What specific date are they looking at when it comes down to trying to make a zero emission fleet? I think that was another one, which looking at that was one of our questions too, when it comes down to does RTD have a zero emission year goal for 50% to 100% electric vehicles? I think that is going to be a huge one. And again, I think that is, if you have a specific date or as your goal, people can associate with that a little bit better and say, okay, this is actually what their time frame is, this is what their timetable is. So yeah, that's what I would add in the specifics.
Director Williams.
This would be a great place to find a contact in California, where they have just passed a statewide mandate on this very topic, and I believe the year is 2035. So that's, a lot of what we are looking at here in Denver is 2050. So that's a whole lot faster. So
It is. And there's some big differences as well between California, right, and Colorado. They can store all their vehicles outside, which mitigates a lot of issues. And we can't,
right.
because we have that whole snow thing. Pops its head out every once in a while. So yeah, I think, do we have a contact from perhaps California? Originally, I left them off because of that key difference, right? And that they don't have to consider inclement weather, or largely don't. But I think it's definitely worth looking at inviting someone if we can find them.
I think we could ask Deborah Johnson if she could
Yeah.
request to
I
somebody
agree.
there.
Ms. McManus?
I think if we're going to be reaching out at some point to other agencies, another question that would be good to ask is what sort of external financial help are they getting that we possibly could ask for or look for support for? Because I know just as a transit board member and the transit support committee that I just was at in Salt Lake City, we discussed this a little bit, and some of the agencies are getting, additional state support to support the dates that they're looking at, and others are looking for other external ways to finance this. So I think that's an important factor that we need to look at, since we don't really get any direct state support at this point. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Okay, so I've been trying to track the various comments here. I put Director Brooms in a separate sort of side notes, more on the policy side. Are there other guiding questions or tweaks to the goal or purpose that folks think are important for to add in here as we're thinking through the goal and the purpose and the way in which we want these to run?
Director Deschelle, it's Angie again. I cannot help but want to reiterate what Ms. McManus is talking about, the lack of state funding RTD receives. I think that we really need to put an exclamation point next to that, because it really does hinder our ability to do different kinds of things, because we don't have the funding that other transit agencies have across the country.
Yes, I bolded and highlighted. Ms. McManus, I show your hand is still up. Ahead of Director
I'm
Geisinger.
sorry, mine.
No worries, Director Geisinger.
Yeah, well, that's why we want to talk to the ZEV Transit enterprise, because they're raising, can't remember if it's 150 or 180 million dollars for transit ZEV fleets. And certainly in Colorado, we're the big gorilla, because so there should be some money there, I would hope.
Okay.
I would just point out that probably a lot of agencies are really at the start of the transition. You know, we've got 2 listed there, but they're both very small. So I think getting some from California or other places on a Zoom would be helpful, but I think you know, a lot of them have sooner goals, but I'm not sure how much transitioning they do it. I think the questions are okay though.
Yeah, it's a fun world we're in. It's exciting to be at the forefront. So, are there any other questions or goal or purpose? What I will commit to you all is following up with Ms. Johnson on which staff would be important to be there and identifying dates for the round tables. Once I have that, I will, if I don't have it sort of by tomorrow, I'll reach out to the 4 folks who have already been reached out to and say, hey, we're going to postpone. I'll get back to you early next week. Director Williams, happy to do that today as well if you prefer. And then I will send out a revised tracking schedule for these roundtables.
If you can get from staff, you know, more than one date for each of these 2 or 3 options so that we can make sure it works for us and then our guests, that would be helpful.
Yep, that is my plans. Ask for dates through the end of September.
Okay.
And I'll include from September 14th through say October 14th.
Okay.
And do you want to have that same information from us?
Yes, that would also be helpful. Ms. McManus, would you or someone from your team be able to help us coordinate all these various schedules? Oh. She's not here anymore.
I prefer actually for me, my point of view to just respond. If you can get a number of dates from staff or times, then I can say, yeah, all these work and all these don't.
Perfect. Okay. Anything, I think something important to keep in mind, Director Williams sent us an article about the shipping delays with these various buses. And I think that's important to think about. And it's also important for, I can't remember who recommended that we sort of revisit this policy. You know, we state in the policy that it needs to be revisited because, as Director Williams often says in the Reimagine Committee, the world is changing. And if someone had told us there'd be scooters all over the place 10 years ago, that was not on our radar. That was not thought of as a mobility solution, as a viable mobility solution. So I think revisiting is going to be important because the tech will change. Anything else? So we will not be meeting on the 14th. For now, let's plan to hold that date of the 28th. And I will be in touch via email with everyone shortly. Last call.
Sorry. And I'm happy to have this discussion also offline with any folks. Regarding the communication that we got on, I think it was August 22nd, regarding the questions that were proposed to staff and the answers. Do you believe that specifically for question number 3, regarding the question that was proposed to staff about does RTD have a 0 emissions year goal for 50% to 100% electric? I had a clarification question on that. Would we want to do that offline or potentially have that conversation now?
I'm happy me to have it now.
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
Before we do, Ms. McManus, did you have something that you wanted to add?
Yes, I just would add that any communications that you're sending to the group come through the board office.
Yes, I believe if I haven't been doing that, I think I've done it on all of them. So,
Yes, you have, but that wasn't the statement you made. So I just wanted to clarify.
yes, and I will state for the record that when I say I will communicate with more than one of you, it will be coming through the board office.
Thank you.
It will not be coming from my personal email. Director McKay, I'm looking at the email where Ms. Johnson had responded in red, where we had asked about.
I thought that was.
Are you talking about that email or a different one?
Yes, I thought that was Fred Worthen's response, or was it?
It is. It's Fred Worthen. Yeah, it's later.
Okay. Yeah, if you're okay with that, I was just wanted to clarify with the answer to number 3. If you're good with talking about that just real quick.
Yeah.
Cool.
Absolutely.
I just thought, so the process of developing a long-range fleet transition plan for RTD should be completed sometime in 2023. I'm also happy to hear from staff, or I'm also happy to hear from other directors who might maybe dive a little bit into that more. If you guys have had that conversation, I'm just kind of curious what that might be looking like, and
Good question.
if staff could present something more for that, because that was the one answer that kind of intrigued me. I was like, okay, what does that plan look like? And if it's still in development, I totally understand as well.
My understanding of that plan is that it's a part of it is still in development, is the short answer, my understanding of that plan. And I realize now I'm looking at a different email than you are.
Yeah, sorry, it was the one that was sent August 22nd to all of us.
Yeah, my email thinks it's August 27th today, which is not at 9:30 a.m. Neither of which are true. So
yeah, I just thought that answer just kind of like, because we talked about last meeting about where is staff at, when it comes down to what our plan is, when it comes down to transitioning with our fleet. And I just thought, that I would love a little bit more detail on that and just a little bit more information, unless I've overlooked something, or, if it's too early in the stages too. I'm happy to wait till 2023 until it's presented. But I also would love, if possible, kind of see where we're at with that. But if it's too much of a headache, I understand.
No, I'll send a note to Ms. Johnson, just asking for more detail on that plan. Director Geisinger?
No, just I agree with Director Bouquet on that, and I think that our work could help influence that plan by setting dates and with the staff. But it'd be good to be working in tandem.
I was just going to say, and vice versa. We
Yeah.
could help them and they could help us.
Exactly.
Right. I don't want to be going on 2 different paths. That's basically what I'm getting at, is we're doing our policy guiding, but at the same time, if staff has their plan, can our policy align with that plan? So that's the general idea of the question.
Yeah. And I think our policy is an opportunity to push folks to prioritize and be maybe a bit more aggressive on this than may otherwise be planned for.
When would we do that? Was that after our roundtables, or
Draft policy.
Well, to know what they're doing, and maybe it is. Maybe it's I'm just trying to think of the best timing on that. It looks like Director Bouquet may have something there.
Well, that's what my hope is, is like we do these roundtables and then we're leading down one path. That's why I would love to know where we're at when it comes to this 2023 plan, prior to a roundtable, so that we're not on some red herring hunt. So
yeah, I will send that note as soon as we wrap up here, and just want to make sure did you all receive the answers that were related to federal standards for federal fund replacement? Did that get passed through to you all?
I don't think I saw it.
Okay, so I think, again, I'm going to ask the board office that any of these all of this correspondence and distribution, it'll be great if you could please make sure that these answers get forwarded to the entire committee. Just so that would be great. So we asked staff if the federal government has set standards for useful life of electric or other no emission vehicles. The answer was that the federal standards do not differentiate between vehicle technologies. Fixed route vehicles purchased with federal funds can only be replaced at 500,000 miles or 12 years. The full useful life of a fixed route vehicle from an asset management program is defined at 14 years by federal standards. There are no exemptions from the federal useful life requirement for replacing fossil fuel vehicles with low emission vehicles. And then we'd asked staff if there can be a distribution email list for this committee that can be put on the website so folks can easily get in contact with everyone. How are we doing on the website and getting those action items done?
It's Jillian. The website is in progress. We're waiting. Once we set these dates, I've changed dates, we'll have those updated and put those in there. And then a few more materials to be updated. It should probably be published by end of the week. Email distribution is a little bit more challenging. We're still trying to figure that out.
Okay. Director McKay.
Sorry. On that note, I saw on the document that we're reviewing for most of this meeting regarding, this is down the line in the future, but I think it is something to kind of have in our back pocket, is coming down to public input and comment. When it came down to the policy decision, basically what we come down as a committee, I'm assuming that website will be part of it, but I also think it might not be the worst idea to start thinking about strategic goals. When it comes our own strategic goals when it comes down to it, because I know in the past we have said to staff we didn't give the public enough time to respond. I think that's fair to put us to that standard when it comes to the public being able to respond. So I don't have to have that discussion today, but I think having that in the back of our minds of how we're going to be collecting public input and public comment with this, and also giving public enough time to comment. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I will, as I send this email to staff asking for availability, I will also ask for availability to assist us with the stakeholder meeting.
Sounds good. Sorry, sorry, Bob, was that?
No, there's nothing.
Okay, perfect. Sorry. You had a look of confusion and I might have misheard the question, but my bad.
No, it was, I saw an email pop up on my phone. Any other questions, comments, thoughts, musings?
Just that maybe some other different questions might come to us along the way here. So this is a good start, but
Yeah.
hopefully we can
Please.
find it.
Email those to me.
Okay.
Grab them. Okay,
Great.
thanks everyone. We are adjourned as of 11:50 a.m.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.